evening and welcome to the March 2nd meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. At this time, anyone with a cell phone or other electronic device, if you could please silence it, put it in vibrate, turn it off, something, anything would be appreciated. If you're here to speak on any application, and we encourage you to do so, we just ask that you go to the podium, state your name for the record. Also, speak into the microphone. If you're going to move away from the podium for a drawing or something, speak in the microphone. This is being recorded by FCTV, and that microphone's for that. Okay, first up is request for continuance under notice of intent. Robert and Lorraine Williams, 26 Eel River Road, East Falmouth, Mass. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until March 30th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we got a motion by Courtney and a second by, was that you, Maury?
Yes, sure.
To accept the continuance until, what was the date again?
30th.
March 30th? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Penzance Point Nominee Trust, care of William Marino, trustee, 153 Penzance Point, Penzance Road, Woods Hole, Mass. Jen.
The applicant is requesting a continuance until March 23rd. They're still waiting for their Loma request. So moved. Second.
Got a motion by Maury, second by Mike, to continue to March 23rd. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Next up, Woods Hole Steamship Authority, care of William Cloutier, 29 Lopscombe Avenue, 33 and 36 Railroad Ave, and Railroad Avenue. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until March 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Courtney, second by Maury.
May I ask a question?
Yes. I'm sorry, Mike.
No?
Can't take that.
Question?
Jen, should we expect any further submissions, or is
Yes.
this a scheduling thing?
No,
Okay,
you will be getting additional material.
okay, thank you.
How many continuances have they had?
The steamship? I don't know their files downstairs, Courtney, but it's a fairly large project, and they were continued for a while, so your consultant could review the
And this,
submission.
the latest, Courtney, was a request by us for
Yep.
more information, so it's, believe me, they would have been here tonight.
Yeah.
23rd.
So,
Okay, I don't have a problem with that, I'm just asking a question.
No, I know.
yeah.
I don't have mind to
So,
answer.
Courtney made a motion,
I seconded it.
Maury seconded it.
okay, Maury seconded. Okay, any other comments?
And Mike and I are recused from this vote.
Yep.
We're not abstaining, we're recusing ourselves.
Okay?
We already got that, Beth, thank you.
All right, I'll call for the vote then. All those in favor of continuing to March 23rd, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. All right, request for continuance under notice, under a amended notice of intent. Robert and Maura McCormick, 93 T-Ticket Path, East Falmouth, Mass. Request to amend the existing order of conditions, DEP 253990, to construct access stairs and a landing to the approved dock. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has requested a continuance until March 30th.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Okay, so right there. Maury made the motion.
No.
Mary seconded.
Oh, I thought Maury
No,
seconded.
somebody else.
I thought
Maury
Maury.
seconded, somebody else made the motion.
Okay.
Court motion, I
Oh,
second.
okay. Courtney and Maury, all right. All right.
The 30th. Yeah.
So a motion to continue to March 30th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Request for determination of applicability. This is the lesser of the two applications. What you want to hear on this is a negative vote, a negative recommendation. Eric Rockwood, 71 Nauset Ave East, North Falmouth, Mass, for permission to vista prune according to the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw regulations and to replace invasive plants with native species. Jen.
Oh, we did the same one? Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until March 9th. Good one, Mark.
So moved.
March what?
Yeah, we don't have it.
March what?
Oh, it's,
Ninth.
Kind of why.
yeah.
Next week.
So moved.
Today's the 2nd, next week will
Got
be
it.
the 9th.
We've had so many 23 and 30 that confused me.
So moved.
I made the motion, I didn't second.
And Mary seconded. Mary seconded.
Well, actually, I didn't.
Mary Moore.
Finally get on this side. Okay, so we have a motion to continue on March 9th. Any other comments? Okay, we'll call for the vote then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Mary Carroll, 115 Charles River Road, Walkway, Mass., for permission to repair the existing timber pier, including replacement of decking, stringers, cross members, and the access stairs per order of conditions under DEP 25-1975. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the staff is recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
Second.
Courtney and Mary. Comments or questions from the commission? Hearing none, comments or questions from the public? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Robert Bateman, 3 Lenora Ave, East Falmouth, Mass., for permission to install native plantings, vista prune, and to accept the existing conditions plan for compliance to
Yeah, Mike.
satisfy orders of conditions under DEP 25-2760 and DEP 25-3204. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the staff is recommending a -2 under the bylaw, a -3 under the state with the resource area boundaries
So
not
moved.
confirmed.
I got Courtney in motion. Second by Mike. Any questions or comments from the commission? Comments or questions from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Request for a hearing under notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. So first up is Aiden Feeney, 3 Concert Road, North Falmouth, Mass., for permission to construct a new elevated deck, install native mitigation plantings, and the associated excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after Mr. Martin's presentation.
Morning, Dave.
Chairman, David Martin here on behalf of the applicant. The Feeneys would like to construct a small addition to an existing elevated deck in a velocity zone. In order to remain under the 200 square feet, which gives you the option to approve the project, we're proposing to remove a small section of the deck that presently exists. The work is in the B buffer zone of coastal bank, and we're proposing, as you might see on the landscape plan, 300-plus square feet of mitigation plants. The coastal bank is the nearest resource area to the coastal bank, and we have coastal beach. In the process of constructing or installing plants and planting the lawn area, we're probably going to remove about 100 tons of stone. You were at the site, you saw the stones. That's really all I have to share with you. If you have questions.
Jen?
David, you're removing that stone from that patio?
Yes, so the patio, I drove to the site to
Lawn.
check the staking, looked out the window, I said, oh my God, what's that? That's why it's not on the plan. Called the owner, I said, what are you doing? He says, well, I can take it out tomorrow. I said, no. Remain calm so the patio goes away. Trust, in any event.
What are you going to replace with the patio? Just lawn,
As shown on the landscape plan, the original intention.
to be the lawn?
Yeah.
Okay. How big is the deck?
The deck,
250?
well, in the 51 square feet of existing deck to be removed, so a net of
So it's like 99?
199.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Chairman?
Jamie?
I think you said any of the septic system was permitted independently,
In 2014, under an RDA.
but that hasn't been done yet.
That's correct, and they intend to do all the work at the same time. And I just put it on there.
Looks like it's caving in, existing, no?
I did not walk to that part of the site.
Any reason you wouldn't do the mitigation along the front wall?
A very difficult place. We considered that. This is a very tough site, a lot of wind, harsh weather. We figured we'd have better luck along the two sides, and there's obviously the view consideration, but, you know, if you look along the natural shoreline, you'll see the wind shear on the vegetation, and we hope to get some protection for the plants that are behind the lead plants. If we did a strip across the front, I don't think we'd ever have any survivability there.
Thank you. Good.
All set, Jamie? Mary?
When you say you're removing the patio,
Yes, ma'am.
you're referring to the thing that has the fire pit on it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great news.
Yeah.
And all the rest of it is maybe greater news. So I think this is definitely a net benefit, so. I don't have any questions.
Betsy?
I just hope you're picking hardy plants for that area, whether they're behind another plant or not. There's gonna
Yeah,
have
it's a
a
difficult
lot of salt,
site.
a lot
Yeah.
of wind.
Yeah, it's hard to choose. There's not a lot of choices for plants. I've left that to the landscape architect, but surely survivability will be an issue with compliance, so they'll struggle with that.
Yeah, they might be better off instead of a regular lawn, just to put sand in and, I mean, all those houses are built on dune anyway.
Yes, they are, certainly
The
are.
only problem is,
Seagrass.
I mean, I was thinking about that, the only problem is a day like today, if you had sand there, it would all be sand blasting their windows.
Could do a xeriscape like out front.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the best. A xeriscape would really be the best.
Then they might eventually find themselves doing
Doing
that
that.
I
after
don't
they
think those
struggle
plants
with
will
what
survive.
they're up against here.
I mean, have sinkhole as their lead plant to try to protect the bayberry, that's not gonna work.
You all set, Betsy?
Yeah.
Mike?
I'm not a, excuse me, I'm not a big favor of structures in the velocity zone. But if improving the existing footings of the existing deck would, I think, go a long way to structure, making that a little stronger, better, just sitting, and if the applicant was so inclined to do that while they're doing the other, I think it would be a good thing.
Since the applicant, how many existing footings, do you have a sense of how many you're looking at in that case?
I think there's probably, by memory, 3, maybe 6.
I'd say that would be acceptable on behalf of the applicant.
Just, if you were thinking it that way, we're keeping some debris out of the resources.
So basically, bringing the existing deck up to code, I'm imagining, correct, Mike?
They might end up doing that anyway.
May end up doing that anyway.
Yeah.
He might, when it gets to the
They might be
building
required
department.
to bring the whole
Right.
deck up to code.
Okay, that was my...
Sure.
Okay, that's Mike. Maury?
I'm not very optimistic at all in the planting species that were chosen. Sweet pepper bush, plethora, those are usually,
Shade tree,
fresh
shade.
water, yeah, they like it along swamp edges and things like that. Inkberry, I mean, you always look around what's there, and it's Amorphala and bayberry. So I think those would be the two things, make a strip across that front maybe, or not so much lineal along the property lines. The soldiers aren't gonna be very well protected there.
Why would you encourage them to be across the front? Just
Well, I'm
block
not
the
saying
view?
totally across the front, but the two corners, instead of them running right
Yeah.
up the property lines, if they're in clumps, they seem to do better than
Totally
soldiers in
understand
a row.
Right.
So it's the same amount of square footage, just
Yep.
instead of them being little lines along the property line, maybe pockets on the, you know, in the corners.
Yeah.
I can still, they don't wreck their view, obviously, but like I say, you know, you don't see any Rosa Virginiana down there. You don't see plethora, you don't see inkberry, you don't see pocatilla. None of those are there, because they won't live.
I
So,
agree with you.
I would just, my recommendation would be that they modify it to be a mafia, cedars and bayberry. Because
Yeah.
even beach plum, they're not even doing that well anymore.
I think the bays and the cedars will probably survive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what's pretty much down in that neck of the woods now. But other than that, I have no other questions.
Kristen?
No questions from the answer.
Gordy? No questions. Okay. We'll entertain a motion.
Move
Close
to,
the hearing.
Do we want a revised plan with the, or are we just gonna do that in deliberation?
Yeah.
Perfect.
You're all okay with that, Jennifer, you know?
Well, the patio's not on the plan anyway. so-
yeah, right. Move to close the hearing and take it under
We're gonna make a
advisement.
finding about the patio and a special condition
I
to
think
remove
that
it.
was Mary's motion and Courtney second.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the community? Questions or comments from the public? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
David, you want these? I'm not gonna be here for the order of conditions, and I know they're expensive, and somebody doing the work might want them. Yep.
Okay, continued hearings under notice of intent. Eel River Road's been continued.
March 30th.
Penzance, 153 Penzance has been continued. Perch Pond Preservation, Inc., Perch Pond Navigation Channel and nearby beaches, East Falmouth. This has already been read into the record.
Yes. Oh, Mike's refusing himself.
Leaving so funny.
Jen, is everybody on the phone?
I don't know, looking at, it should be right next to you, Betsy. That
Oh,
one right
this
there.
one.
I know Mike's recusing himself. Oh, that's fine.
Should I read it? Not everybody.
Oh, yeah, then read it.
Jamie, Mary, Betsy, Russ, Maury, Kristen, Courtney.
That is everybody, Betsy.
Not
What happened
Mike.
to Mike? Oh,
Not
he
Mike.
left.
Recused himself already.
Yeah.
See, I'm so
Whatever.
attendant to what I'm doing, I missed it all.
Good evening.
Good evening, members of the commission. I'm Brad Holmes with Environmental Consulting and Restoration. Along with me this evening is Mike Borselli with Falmouth Engineering, the Perch Pond Preservation Group, and Don Anderson as well. We presented and opened the notice of intent hearing for the Perch Pond Maintenance, Dredging, and Beach Nourishment Project a while ago. We've been working to respond to some issues and questions. As I remember the last meeting that we presented with you, there was two main concerns. One concern was responding to the Division of Marine Fisheries letter, which had asked for an investigation of potential cysts within the maintenance dredge channel. We've done that. Don Anderson is here to describe a report of his findings that we submitted to the Conservation Commission, so I'll turn that over in a minute. Another issue that we're still working on is shellfish concerns. We've met with Chuck Martinson, the shellfish constable. We met just recently on Friday, and Jennifer was there as well, and walked the beach nourishment area and also reviewed the channel. We need to further coordinate with Chuck. Chuck's on vacation. I guess this week I received an email that he's out of state. So we do have some additional work to do on that, which we're working on. To get to back to the dredge channel and cyst survey, I'd like to introduce you to Don Anderson and let you hear his findings and speak with him.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question for Mr. Holmes. Mr. Holmes, you said you submitted that, Mr. Anderson's report to the Concom?
Yes, I have 2 extra copies.
When did you submit it?
It was emailed to you and to others I know it's been a while.
Okay.
It was submitted. I do have 2 extra
Yeah,
copies.
if you don't mind, and if you could get me the date of the email, that would be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
It was February 3rd was the report, so it would have been about a month ago.
Okay, thank you.
There's 2 copies, and,
I'll take that one.
sure.
Thank you.
Presumably, we'll be getting a copy after. Jen? You'll s-
Yeah,
you'll
I
send
will.
it to all
I'll
of us?
check my email. I don't remember this coming
All right.
into, but we've been in a bit of flux. So.
We're patient.
I know.
Good evening. I'm Don Anderson, and I was asked to do a survey for the red tide cysts, and I'll explain that in a second. But quickly, my background is that I'm a scientist at Woods Hole Oceanographic. I've been there for many decades. I'm in the biology department. My area of research is exactly on this topic, red tides, and I did my thesis on the cysts of red tides, and a whole lot of that work was in Perch Pond. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, that was a hot spot for red tides and toxicity in the region, in the state. This is a toxin that originates in little single-celled algae. They are eaten by shellfish, accumulate those toxins, and they can be dangerous, even lethal to humans who could eat them. And the cycle of the blooms, as we call them, starts in the sediments. It's like a seed for crabgrass or dandelions or something that's dormant on your lawn, and then certain times of the spring it will germinate. These cells will germinate out of the bottom, start photosynthesizing as the sunlight's there, the days are longer, the water's warmer, create a bloom as they divide and become more numerous. Shellfish eat them, become dangerous. Now, it's very important to know that there are 2 kinds of red tides in this region. One that you read about mostly in the newspapers like the Boston Globe will be ones that stretch from Canada down into Boston and Massachusetts Bay. What we have here on Cape Cod is very different. We call them point source blooms. And they basically start and develop and end within little embayments like Perch Pond. And the reason they do is that there are cysts in the sediments in these areas that will germinate, but there's relatively limited flushing of the water within these salt ponds or kettle holes. And there's more to it still. The cells migrate up and down in the water. They swim each day. It's called diurnal or diel vertical migration, but they don't come right to the surface. So when the surface water leaves the inlet, the cells are kept behind in the pond. So in order to have a hot spot for the red tide, you need a narrow and shallow inlet as well as a nice system, lots of cysts, and a place where you can start a bloom. Perch Pond was like that. It was a great place to do my thesis work and early research work down here. And it has been many years since, so all the original papers that you'll read about in this report were from my work, because we were the ones that found the population there, studied it, did everything. And so the DMF was well aware of that and said, well, if you're going to dredge Perch Pond, there could be a concern, A, that you could disperse sediment that would carry these cysts out into Great Pond or somewhere else and spread the problem, or B, that you could actually somehow alter the circulation in a way that favors the growth of these organisms, makes things worse. As I said, we had not been in Perch Pond. We've been working down in Nauset and out in the Gulf of Maine for all these years, so I didn't know what we were going to find. What we did under the DMF recommendation was to sample 5 different locations, 4 of them basically either the inlet channel or in Great Pond where some of the spoil, the dredge material, was to be deposited. And then 1 I asked to have it be further into the pond in a depression area where we knew we used to have a lot of cysts. You'll see in the report a map where we have one of our older surveys from 1983. We did, I basically have written all of the prep papers about the way to do this. So the methods we use are totally scientifically rigorous and acceptable. And the results are that in the channel and over in Great Pond, we found zero cysts of of the Alexandrium dinoflagellate that we're talking about here. I mean, I was worried that if we found some, it starts to be a difficult decision, how many is too many, that kind of thing, but we found 0. 0 in the surface layers, 0 down even further. We did not go way down deep because historically in the Cape, we find all of the cysts within the top, let's say 10, 12 centimeters, and we just don't find anything that's viable that's deeper. The interesting point, though, is that in the sample that we took deeper in Perch Pond, we found some cysts, but it worked out to be only 10 cysts per cubic centimeter. That would work out to be maybe 100,000 in a square meter. Sounds like a lot, but in fact, it's 500 times lower than we found in 1983 and all the years before that. And this is consistent. So what I'm seeing is a population that has essentially disappeared almost from Perch Pond in the decades since we studied it. And it's consistent with the fact that the DMF used to monitor Perch Pond on a weekly basis throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And they stopped doing that because it sort of lost its reputation as a hot spot. They still monitor that way out in Nauset at Salt Pond, Mill Pond, Roberts Cove. They still do that. They do not do that anymore in Perch Pond, and now I see why. So the conclusions in terms of this project, from my standpoint, is that there is no risk about the red tide, about spreading it. If there's resuspended material during the operation, there's essentially going to be no cysts in there to worry about. If there is spoil to be deposited somewhere, there's essentially nothing in it from the red tide standpoint. And in fact, by making the channel deeper and increasing the flushing, you remove one of the 2 mechanisms that I said creates these hot spots on the Cape, which, remember I said it takes an inlet that is shallow and restricting, and it takes a big cyst population. Well, we don't have that big cyst population anymore, and by getting rid of the inlet, you don't have, even if you did have the cyst there, you're no longer letting the cells accumulate within this little point source. So from my standpoint, I see no concerns whatsoever. This was a sort of an easy report to write for me. No concerns whatsoever about the red tide. I would add, though, that I think there are some real benefits that I could see happening within Perch Pond. Over the years, with all the development and the septic and so forth, the water clarity, water quality in there has deteriorated, as it has in many places. This flushing is going to be good for Perch Pond. It will lower the nutrient levels, probably increase water clarity, and I think get rid of any sort of contaminants and things, and it'll be a much healthier ecosystem. I think that's a benefit I'm supposed to be just talking about the red tide, but I think it's a significant benefit to have this kind of when an area gets closed up like that, is what we call being flood dominated, you basically get a change in your tidal velocities, and you really don't flush them out well. Once you clear that inlet out, you get your tides change, tidal elevations will change, and you're going to get much better flushing. So those are my observations. It's written in the report. Happy to take any questions.
I don't have any questions. I do have one question, Mr. Anderson, and thank you for this, and it is encouraging to know that the population has decreased. So when you found it in the deeper section, you said you found it in a deeper layer in Perch Pond. Did you?
Deeper waters.
Deeper water, okay, not deeper in the sediment. Okay, that's all I needed clarification on. Thank you. And one quick question, Russell, for Mr. Holmes. Brad, did you send this to DMF?
Yes, I sent it to them with a copy to you, but I'll go
Okay.
through my records.
No, we've been kind of crazy down in my office. So I will go back, I'm sure. I know I had seen an email mentioning the cyst, but I didn't see an attachment, but I'll go back and look. So thank you.
I resent it. It's February 4th. It's resent again.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen, do you have some?
Yeah, I just have a question for you that The previous time that they dredged, it was to -3 feet, and they're requesting -4 feet this time. And you said there are no cysts down at that
That's right.
level? Okay.
So is there, well, really, the area you need to worry about for the assist is just a few inches. So the difference between 3 feet and 4 feet, from my standpoint, is, it's more of an engineering issue. There's nothing, no bearing one way or the other on that red tide issue.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is a positive project, and it certainly will improve the situation if it goes through. The association in Birch Pond Preservation, are they being proactive in the community that surrounds Birch Pond with regard to other nitrogen loading issues? In other words, attacking the source of the problem? I mean, you flush it out, it's like flushing a toilet. The problem's still there. So is there anything that is being done by this association to reduce the level of nitrogen loading?
I'm afraid I can't answer that.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize it's not part of this, I realize it's not part of this application, but it's important for me.
Right. So I'm Matt Sleeper, I'm president of the Perch Pond Association, and with me are some of the members this evening.
Yes.
To answer that question, specifically, we as a group have not taken on that challenge yet. It's one of, we do have a website, and one of the initiatives that we do have is communicating kind of more conservation-based approach to the way we manage our properties. I would say that any new property, clearly based on requirements from not only, the local and, state level and federal level, any new properties, clearly all septic systems, plantings, everything that needs to be done is being done, and there's examples of that on any project that has been done as of recent. Jen has been great at kind of managing, the expectation and making sure that that stuff is done. And clearly, there has been zero pushback to that level from our group. We want, as I mentioned the last time I stood up here, our drive is not only to we just don't want to dredge the pond. We want to make the pond a better place to be around. And part of making it a better place to be around is to make the pond healthier. And clearly, we took the initiative based on the last meeting to hire Dawn to do kind of the initial study, because we were concerned, as much as you folks were concerned, about the cyst. So we've kind of mitigated that issue. I think we've come to the conclusion that doing this project is more beneficial to the pond than not doing it. So as part of what we do and as part of what we'd like to do, this association has been set up long-term. It's not a short-term group, it's a long-term group. And we continue to invest. So part of the project is to make sure that we're diligent in the way that we manage that resource and around that pond. So, okay?
Thank you.
Lori, anything?
Jen, are we going to talk about shellfish tonight? Because we haven't had the shellfish survey.
We don't have the shellfish
Okay, so
survey.
I'm not
I
gonna
mean,
get
I
it.
do
I'll
need
just
to
wait.
get together with Mr. Holmes to try to craft a way that they're going to do the shellfish survey.
Because I did, I'm sure we all read it, it was in the record from David Brown from the shellfish
Yes, you
aspect
can
of
talk
it.
about shellfish if you'd like,
No,
but
no, there's no
I mean,
sense
we
to
went
talk
out
about it
there
if it's gonna
and-
get continued. And without the figures of shellfish and the impact it'll have, then we'll save that for when it's continued and we have that discussion.
That's it.
Sure, I can address that quickly. We had a site walk with Chuck on Friday. I followed up with him on Monday. He's unavailable. Trying to nail that down with Chuck to get some more guidance from him that I can move forward with and present to the commission. So we are looking to continue, correct?
Right. And Waterways, I know, is having a meeting tonight. It's gonna be discussed, so, okay, thank you.
My question's for Don. Hi. So I'm just curious, when you did your PhD work so many decades ago, Sorry about that. And your recent study, did you do any sediment analyses? I'm just wondering if sediment have changed in composition.
The grain size. In this recent study, I didn't do it. I don't know whether they've done, they presumably, you've done some for the, what we did, we just looked and it was very silty and sandy, very sandy material on the inlet. And that's consistent with a high energy system.
I'm more interested in where you found the cysts in the pond itself.
That was much more silty and a little bit more clay. Where we found that it was silty mud, which is, again, consistent with where these cysts accumulate. They're very light, fluffy, and they're going to act like clay particles and end up in the little deposition. That's why we went to a deeper area to find them. So in this case, it's not a real scientific, it's just observing it, saying it's silty mud, but years ago, I'd have to think back, we've done sediment analyses in lots of different places. I'm sure we've done some in Perch Pond. I don't know whether we've done them right at that exact site. But I think my guess would be that it's silted in a lot, that there's been a lot of accumulation. That's what the nature of these kettle holes is. They're low velocity. As that tide gets constricted, as that velocity gets slowed down, things fall out, and things fall out within the pond, and then they don't make it back out with the tide, and so it's really a deposition site, and so you just have more and more just muck at the bottom. So I'm quite sure if we did look hard at that, we'd find that the bottom had changed considerably over these years, and I would hope that would improve with time.
And also, well, since if you didn't do sediment analysis, you also didn't do organic content.
No.
But that also probably has changed over time.
I would certainly expect that.
Yeah.
And I think, there could be, as a scientist, I was kicking myself because we had a number of years where we were watching the population of cysts. We were mapping them out like the one you see there year after year, a lot of work, and it was sort of going down, and I remember this is really interesting. Well, could this get to a point where the problem disappears? But we got funding to do other things, and now I'm back, however, 20 years later, and they're gone. So I don't know why, and I wish I had all that kind of data, the nutrients, the organics, just what was going on in the pond, both the physics, the velocities, and the chemistry that led to the basic disappearance of this organism. It would have been for science, it would have been an important study.
Yeah. So just one more question. Since you said that the DMF was sort of keeping track of this, these guys did open the inlet in the early 2000s. So when was it that DMF stopped monitoring?
I don't know that, and I'm remiss a little bit because I know the person at DMF who wrote the letter about this issue, because I was actually on her thesis committee. And so I don't know the exact answer, but I think that back then, they probably had nobody at DMF who understood anything about the red tide.
Yeah.
Now they've hired somebody who did their thesis working on the red tide, and so they raised the issue.
Yeah.
So, but I know I don't know why they stopped monitoring, other than year after year after year with no toxicity.
If you don't see an outbreak,
There's a point at which you say, we don't have to do this anymore, but someone else could probably tell me. I don't know whether Perch Pond was closed for other reasons for shellfishing those years.
It has been closed, but I think it's because of bacterial.
Right, but once that's happened, you don't need to monitor for the red tide anymore, because nobody can eat those shellfish fresh and at that moment. So that's probably why they stopped.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Mary?
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question because you piqued my curiosity, and I don't want people to think that I've got a point I'm making or something. But in terms, you said that these cysts are different from what you find in the Gulf of Maine, or I'm not clear on whether their environment that they thrive in is the only difference, or do they have the same kind of consequences for shellfish contamination and human health problems?
Okay. The cysts are not different. It is the same species. It is a different strain of the same species. So it's just like we are all the same species, but we have different nationalities. It would be just like that. And the ones that are here on the Cape and down in Long Island in these sort of little salt ponds, they seem to be very much adapted to these shallow water systems where their germination is really determined by the temperature. And whereas the ones out in the Gulf of Maine, they're down 200 meters deep in the dark and the almost constant cold, they have a little clock. It's something that we wrote a paper about some years ago that wakes them up certain times of the year so they can germinate and come up to the surface waters, because they're not getting a cue from temperature and day length and daylight like the shallow water ones do. So there's one fundamental difference. Otherwise, they produce the same toxins. The mechanisms for causing toxicity is the same. It's just that in the Gulf of Maine, it's such a big, wide open system. These blooms can stretch hundreds of miles along the coast, and they're much more challenging to study and understand, whereas these smaller ones are like little ponds, and they're great research areas. But fundamentally, the mechanisms are different for the blooming.
Yeah, do the effects include aerosol effects, or?
You must go to Florida then.
No, but I work with Porter.
Okay, oh, all right, that's right. So, yes, the aerosol issue is only down in Florida. That's a different organism. It's called Carenia. This one's, the genus is Alexandrium. That one breaks apart in the surf zone, and the toxin gets into air, the sea spray, and you can inhale it and have lots of aerosol issues. This particular toxin is water soluble, and I could go through why that matters, but because it's water soluble and the other one is soluble in fats and oils, that makes a big difference as to whether it can become an aerosol particle. So no aerosols. This one's just a problem if you eat something that has accumulated that toxin, like a shellfish does.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie?
Oh, I have nothing to add.
Something else?
Yeah, I have another question. Remember about, I know you'll remember this because you were prominent in this study, when this Gulf of Maine bloom, it was a huge bloom, and it came down, it worked its way down, it tucked its way around the Cape, but it didn't get this far.
Yeah, 2005.
Yeah, so did any of those, I mean, that closed a lot of the shellfishing out in the outer Cape, but did any of those spores, and so, but you're saying that the outer Cape also has these resident populations. So was there a mixing of the two at the time?
Basically, the answer is in Nauset, yes, we've actually documented a mixing of the big coastal bloom that came down. I mean, 1972 was another time that happened, but in 2005, it came down around Provincetown, around the outer Cape, and even got out to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, closed those areas down. It didn't tuck in under towards Falmouth. It didn't really make it through the canal, so we were sort of protected in this area. But the cysts from that basically ended up being washed offshore someplace. We have observed that there can be a quick incursion of those big blooms into Nauset through that inlet. Typically 2 or 3 weeks or a month after the little localized blooms have occurred and died out, everything seems to be fine, and then with a certain bloom coming down the coast and the winds moving it in, you can get a little surge of toxicity and then it goes away. It's just a very ephemeral effect from these big blooms on the Cape. And the biggest concern is much more these populations that are high abundance that grow and cause real red tides in some of these kettle holes. But no, the cysts from the big blooms, we just think they're way out in something called a mud patch, which is many miles offshore, a big deposition zone way off of Cape Cod.
Okay, just one last one. I know you asked me not to ask any questions tonight. But the last one is, how do you suppose they got to these kettle holes in the first place?
Yeah, there's a good question.
Like bird
Yeah,
feed or?
Well, we've done a lot of genetics on these and really looked, and that's another reason we say that they're sort of different from the ones in Maine. It's not just the clock. There are some different genetic markers. And so we don't, in much of Massachusetts and New England, the red tide problem didn't occur before 1970, 72. It was way up in Bay of Fundy and down East Maine only. But as a result of a huge outbreak then, that was another bloom that came way down, caught Massachusetts off guard, closed everything down. That did introduce cysts to a lot of areas, and we used to think that that was what happened to Salt Pond and Perch Pond. But, and in fact, the toxicity, they started monitoring in 73, 74, 75, and found toxicity in Perch Pond. But they hadn't monitored in the 60s or anything like that. And once we started doing these more detailed genetic studies, we found they're not the same populations at all. It was not introduced during that big 72 outbreak. It had been there all along and just not been noticed. So it was, maybe that's the time that the inlet starts to fill in, you start to get a little bit more accumulation of the cells, and then people are aware of this toxin, they start measuring, testing for it, and then you find it. So I think it's been there a long, long time. That's why it's fascinating that it looks to be disappearing, because, it's...
Well, good for the people who live there.
Oh, yes.
Maybe not so good for you.
I remember, I don't know whether it was anybody here, I remember being out in a rowboat and sampling when I was doing some early work there, and people were clamming, and I knew the shellfish were really dangerous. And I was hearing, oh, we've shellfished here my whole life, and it's not a worry, and I don't do that. This is a dangerous
You declined any of the shellfish they offered you.
Yeah. It's much, much better now, and I think it'll get better still.
Okay.
I just have one last thing. The cysts that are in the center of the pond, with boating and turbulence, they're not going to, they're still there.
Yes, but they're there in, remember the numbers I just gave you. If the 10 cysts per square centimeter, and you take that over a full meter, that's 100,000. The numbers that we used to have out there were 500 times higher. So it would have been, instead of 100,000 on a square meter that can germinate and get into the water, it was 50 million for every square meter, and that was over a huge area of the pond. So yes, there are still some there, but it does take a certain number of cells to start a bloom. It's a scientific term we sometimes call the inoculum size effect. In other words, if you have a tiny little, if you only put out 1 or 2 or 3 cells, there's too much of a chance they're going to get eaten, or they're going to die, or something's going to happen, and they have to divide too many times to get to the point where you get a bloom. So you need a big surge of germination from the bottom, and the numbers just aren't there for that now.
So you would eat the shellfish there?
I would.
Well, you wouldn't now.
I mean,
because
because of the septic and the bacteria, but I would not worry at this stage about the toxins. And clearly the DMF, well, doesn't either. Maybe if it's closed because of pollution, but still, if they really worried about Falmouth, we have not had any toxicity anywhere in Falmouth for decades. The nearest problems are down in Orleans and East Hampton right now.
Just one more quick question.
Sure.
Is this like ciguatera in that? Well, you knew I was going to get to that. And now you think it's completely off point. But the point is, do they always produce the toxin?
Yeah. The answer is, it's like ciguatera. By the way, Mindy's working for me now.
I know she is. I have to come over and visit.
She was on a thesis committee with me.
Yeah.
So the answer is ciguatera is similar in that the species that cause that toxin produce it. If they make the toxin, they always produce it. This is the same thing here. If they produce it, they always do. It can vary in terms of potency with how fast they're growing, that kind of thing. But they're always producing some. But there are also non-toxic strains of both. And that Perch Pond had the toxic strain, still does. So yes, it's similar that way. They don't lose that.
Wasn't that interesting to learn about the biology?
I'm telling you, it was amazing. Learned something new. But where does the survey stand? Did you say the shellfish survey? Sure. Because obviously, we're continuing.
Right, we
so-
need to continue to, so that we can coordinate with Chuck and get this done, or get his guidance on that. So
What type of time frame are you looking at?
he provided me with an email on Monday that I think he's out for 10 days, so we probably need towards the end of March.
And Brad, he's gonna coordinate with you, because the last email I saw, he said that the survey's gonna they're gonna decide how they want their survey done. So we'll have to sit down with Chuck and myself to figure out kind of a grid pattern for you to do. It's kind of, we'll just modify it. Because he's not gonna set the survey, this board has to approve the methodology, so. Pleasure.
To continue it?
You need
Yeah.
the end in March, you
The
said?
30th?
Yes, if you have that or in something, I don't know what your timeline is in March, so towards the
It would be
end.
in March 30th or after.
March
So-
30th would be great, and if we have to
Okay.
continue again, we'll put a request in at a time.
Okay.
Fair enough.
At the request of the applicant,
Oh.
I make a motion to continue to March 30th.
Second?
Okay, so Betsy with a motion and Mary with a second. Any other comments, questions from the commission? You all set, Betsy?
We get to work every day in February, and we had
That's
to
it.
work every day
Every
in
Wednesday.
March, because we got a couple of times off in January.
You had an extra day in February to do more work, right?
We did.
Okay, any comments or questions from the public?
I just have one comment.
Sure.
Do I need to reintroduce myself?
Yes, please.
Matt Sleeper, President of Perch Pond Association. The only comment I do want to make regarding shellfish in Perch Pond, and this is fact-based, right? And we'll cover more of this when we ultimately do the shellfish study. But it is a fact that after the last time this pond was dredged, that you could take shellfish, including soft shell, from the pond. And there was a substantial area that was opened that actually would be a huge net benefit to actually revenue for the fishermen and the population of the shellfish in that pond. So fact-based, it was reopened. Secondly, I was with the Mass Fisheries lead that did the study with the other day, and he pointed, we were at extremely low tide the other day, and he pointed to the shellfish bed on the right within the pond, and I can point to it on, I can read this thing from the side. So, this is Great Pond. In here, this whole section is a big, shallow bed. So what he said, effectively, was that area was the most prolific soft-shell clam bed in all of Falmouth when it was open. So that is a fact he stated to me when we were together the other day. So in the end, it's a net benefit to the actual harvestable area for the local clammers. So that's my one point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? We
I
have,
have them.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I'll say
was a
Mike.
statement.
I'll get to it.
That
I
was a
just want to
statement.
make sure the
I'm
public had it.
Yourself.
Okay, so we have a motion to continue to March 30th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. See you on the 30th. Okay. Next up is Bruce and Susan Sheridan, 141 Shorewood Drive, East Falmouth, Mass. Permission to construct and maintain a 4-foot by 255-foot pier consisting of prefabricated aluminum gangways, 3-foot by 20-foot ramp, 8-foot by 12-foot float system, install 14 10-inch vinyl coated pilings, and associated clearing, excavating,
Mike,
and landscaping.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Matt Costa, Cape and Islands Engineering. We're back tonight, here with Mr. Sheridan tonight. Last time we were here, we continued because we needed to sit down with the conservation agent, Mark Kaspersik, and review some cutting, removal of a tree that had occurred on the property some time back. It was associated with the installation of the septic system. So we have submitted a revised plan that was the result of working with Mark that shows two planted areas along the coastal bank. You'll see one to the south and one to the north of the walkway heading down to the proposed pier. You see those two planted areas called out. We also are proposing two tupelo trees be planted in addition to those mitigation plantings. Lastly, I'm going to hand you another letter of support. This is our 9th letter out of our 10 abutters, certified abutters. So I'm going to submit that for tonight. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Jen.
Matt, you saw Mark's email today that he sent around 2 o'clock regarding your plan?
No.
Okay, it said on your plan dated February 24th, the mitigation tupelo trees must come at least 5 feet landward of existing vegetation north tree and at least 5 feet landward of existing shrub mitigation. The original large white oak removed within existing lawn and trees should be kept away from existing invasives out of the native plantings, and the shrub mitigation added north of the path and planting south of the path to correct the disturbed vegetation in the burn pit area is good. All plantings must be installed by May 15th, not June 15th, and this is a violation, and the more growing time the trees and shrubs have, the better. So he wanted you to submit a additional plan, just showing the relocation of those trees. Okay?
Be happy to.
No, you would.
And I didn't
You'd
get
be
that
very-
email, as of a few
150
minutes ago anyway, but no problem.
What's your email? He has this going to Omni.
I have several of them. He gets them to me.
All right, well, do you want him to send this to a specific email address?
I'll follow up with it.
All
Make
right,
sure
it went to your the Omni one. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
I don't know why he still has that. He's Mark. So if you could just follow up with that, and we can close the hearing, and if you'd get me the revised plan reflecting his comments on this, I'd be fine.
Mike? Laura?
I just still have a concern with that salt marsh, that they didn't try to span it as the DMF had asked. And obviously that wasn't attempted because it's still the same. And when we have an impact on salt marsh, I feel we should have mitigation somewhere, and there's none here. So if you're gonna take out salt marsh, which goes against every one of my moral fibers, 2.2 square feet of it, that somewhere there should be something planted or something. It just blows my mind when I see one like this, I'm sorry.
Well,
It's huge and it's obtrusive, and I know it's just a, aesthetic thing, and you're trying to span the salt marsh, but you're still pile driving in the salt marsh. So if you had made more of an attempt to span that, as the DMF said, I would be probably more palatable.
okay. Well, we did make a great attempt to span it due to the 40-foot gangway sections. We do only have 4 piles in the salt marsh, which is does meet the performance standards. And, we don't have mitigation associated with the dock in your form of typical plantings, but we do have mitigation for this dock. It came in the form of shellfish seeding. So we did think about it, and we did try to craft a project that was, to use your term, a net benefit. I just offer that for your
Okay,
consideration.
and the marine fisheries were happy, I mean, the DNR were happy with the mitigation?
They were actually happy with the design. I don't know, it was the
Okay.
most positive DMF letter I've read in a long time, that they liked the 40-foot gangway and spanning as far as possible, and they liked the through-flow decking. And
Yes, they did like the.
that was almost verbatim.
Well, whenever I see it's an improvement to the resources, it's sometimes kind of hard when a dock isn't improving. If there was no dock, that would be a good improvement.
I understand, but it's a delicate balance. We
I
got the
know, I
environment
know.
and property owners' rights we try to do our best with.
Thank you, that's all.
Kristen?
Well, yeah, I agree. It bothers me going over the salt marsh, but I don't see, I wonder, is there any way to go, I don't know, is it south, so that you're not spanning such a big distance, or is that too close to the property?
Yeah, if you'll recall our previous conversations about this, there's certain setbacks we need to keep off the property line unless we have written consent from the
And this is-
affected abutter.
This is the closest you can.
Yes, and out of the 9 letters of support we have, that abutter is the one we don't have.
Okay. No, I agree with the mitigation for salt marshes. I mean, it seems a shame, but, yeah.
Courtney?
No question.
Betsy?
I have no questions.
Wow.
Yet.
Shocking.
I have no questions.
Jamie?
I'm good.
Ready to close it? Make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Get me that plan.
Motion by Betsy and a second by Mike. Any other comments, questions? Any questions from the public?
Oh, one last comment, because just in case it doesn't get into the discussion. On page 10, remember the spray? You didn't delete that out for the Phragmites removal, that there is no spraying?
Yes.
Because I probably won't be here for the deliberation.
No, that's actually baked into the methodology for all Phragmite removal projects we have on the table right now.
You, Murray?
Yeah.
Okay. We move call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions unanimous, so moved. Thank you, Matt. Have a nice night. Next up is Carl Gravina, 45 Madeline Road, East Falmouth, Mass. Permission to remove the existing pier and float and to construct an elevated 4-foot by 12-foot walkway with stairs, a 5-foot by 20-foot fixed terminal T, install 10-inch diameter pilings with associated clearing, excavating, and landscaping. Jen?
I'll save any of my comments until after Mike's.
Mike?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant, Mr. Gravina. This dock's not quite as long as the last dock. The property is at 45 Madeline Road, and this was continued without being opened because
Wasn't staked.
somebody didn't stake it. So that person has been fired, and it is now staked. And I'm only kidding about the firing part. I'd be firing myself. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, really?
In any event, Mr. Gravina approached us several months ago. He took over the property from his parents, and he contacted us because he wanted to pursue a Chapter 91 license because he discovered during the family title transfer that there was no Chapter 91 license. So he had initially thought, well, I'll call an engineer and I'll fill out a one-page form and I'll get my license application up to the state. So I educated him on a couple of things, starting with the fact that you need to have approval from the Conservation Commission and the Board of Selectmen before you can even qualify to apply to the state. I asked him if he could produce any records on the existing dock, and he couldn't produce any records of any local permitting. The dock, in effect, has no status. It's an older dock. It's been there for a very long time. I wouldn't even have attempted to try to demonstrate through aerial photos because it wasn't as though he was going to try to grandfather that dock. The dock doesn't meet your standards, and there was an opportunity to improve the dock and make it so it met your standards. So the dock is in effect like a new dock, and the old dock has no standing, will be removed. So the situation is that there's an existing access from the upland to a fixed pier, and then right alongside the pier is a floating dock. And it's right along the shore in shallower water. We propose to change that geometry a little bit, make it an entirely fixed structure, no float anymore, make it slightly longer just to get to the required water depth. As always, the first thing we did after we determined where the water depth was, we laid out the dock, and then we had a meeting with Greg Frazier, and Mr. Frazier reviewed it, and there's a letter in your file that says that he reviewed it and he has no issues. Before Jen calls me on it, the date of the letter is not consistent with the date of this plan. I need to get you a new letter. The plan geometry hasn't changed, but several months went by since the original meeting with Mr. Frazier, so we updated the plan date. But I will submit a new letter to you from Mr. Frazier that refers to this plan date. The structure is typical to what you'd see. It's piles, 10-inch diameter, piles, timber. The walkway is being modified. If you look closely at the profile, you can see in the background the existing profile is much lower. The new profile is designed to be slightly more elevated above the water for public access and improve sunlight penetration. There's no piles driven into any salt marsh. There are 2 slivers of salt marsh on each side. All of the decking is proposed to be through-flow decking. Because this is elevated, once you get past the point of providing access, stairs come back down to a lower level, and again, the dock's fixed, and it's a T, and it's measuring 100 square feet, 5 by 20. You allow up to that size. The walkway is 4 feet wide. The mooring field is shown. The boat will tie here at the terminal end parallel to shore. There was a shellfish survey done by Pam Newbert from Stantec, and it's in the file. And the results of the shellfish determined that there are no significant densities of shellfish. It's probably due in part to being in the very upper reaches of Eel Pond. It's probably starting to get brackish in the upper reaches, but the densities weren't there. It's centered on the property. It meets the setbacks to the 2 sidelines, both your requirement and the state requirement. We are proposing seasonal utilities. They're shown on the plan. And I think that sums it up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jen?
No questions.
Betsy?
I don't have any questions. It's just, you might pass on to Pam, this is not a huge deal, but she has a typo in her density. It should be 0.081 per 1 square feet, which is, and the final density is correct, 0.07 over 9 square feet.
Oh, I see, yeah, right.
Yeah, it's just it's a typo.
Mhm.
What's that?
Yeah, yep,
Mary?
no other questions.
No questions?
Amy?
No questions.
Mike?
Elevations are in NGD,
They're taking, they're
on
removing the
Nav 88.
aspect.
NADD.
They already
And
told
where does that
Where's it
relate
gonna be
to?
stored?
No, it's not going to be part
Mean
of
High
the new
Wall.
situation.
It's
all
effectively
Which,
the same, well, it's actually, it's about a foot different. So the water depth that you require is 3 feet based on mean low water datum. And then converting this to Nav 88, it's like 3.5. So we've cited it so we're in water depths of 3.9, 4.1 on both ends. So just over 3 feet, 3.5 feet NAVD 88.
okay. Other than that, looks good to me.
Laurie?
We used to, Mike, remember when we used to ask for pictures to show these historic docks? Do you have any?
I have pictures.
Oh, you do? Oh, good.
Oh, you mean aerials or
No,
just pictures?
you know, when the people say they've been there for 30 years or 100 years or whatever. Because in one part you say it's been there several years, and then another one it says decades, so I just want to know how long it's been there, that it's even from,
I can honestly say it was there in 1990 because the order of conditions that was written on the house project, I believe, in addition to the existing house, which was issued in October of 1990. Special condition number 3, the dock on the property must be legally licensed.
so it was not licensed way back then?
Yeah.
Which means, because when
It
Jack
doesn't-
90.
This is a new dock.
Yeah, it's a new dock, I'm just making the statement that it's been
was
there
new.
since 90.
It's irrelevant.
That's all I can state for fact.
I know it's a brand new dock, but one of the reasons that they have depth of water there, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but when a boat this size sits on that little dock and it turns its engines on when it was
It makes
and
it
very
deeper
shallow,
water.
because the water there was less than 9 inches today when I was there.
Yeah,
So, and I brought my tape measure. So at 9 inches with that boat there, I'm sure they were impeded during, they could only go in and out at certain tides anyway. But we all know, when you turn on the engines of a boat, it makes turbidity and it scours and it blows out all the dirt and you get a very deeper area underneath it. So when you look at the numbers on this, on where the old float is to the new float, basically where the new depth, the water depth is, I'm just saying,
Found it hard to believe.
you know, without it being
That's hard
licensed
to
back
believe.
then and now, and there was no baseline, but that is one of the problems with a lot of these docks, but I know I'm negative Nelly in the docks tonight, you guys. But, you know, when I see shellfish habitat constantly getting compromised for people to have bigger boats and bigger boats and bigger docks, it's very frustrating, because it's only a benefit for a boat and not for the environment. And this is going out further, I'm happy to see that, and, you know, the flow-through lighting and all that, and your,
We're eliminating the float completely, the float.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's never gonna touch the bottom, so it is an improvement. But it is still very shallow there, and, anyway, that's only my only comment.
Kristen?
I guess my only comment is that the square footage, you push it to the extent, fullest extent that you can possibly get. Is there a reason for that, or the size of boat, or just because?
Well, just because you allow up to 100 square feet, and 100 square feet is marginally, not marginally, but it's not a very big operating surface to work on when you have a boat tying it. And the boat, normally, when I do them, they're normally 6 by 16, which is 96 square feet, and we do 6 instead of this, which is 5 by 20, because a little bit wider is better for just to give up 4 feet of length, because when it's 5 feet wide, before you know it, you're falling off the edge on the back. I mean, it's not much, picture of like 4 by 8 piece of plywood, there's not a lot of width there, so you add another foot, it gets narrow.
Sounds like from experience.
So you get.
Size of a shed.
You get like 6 feet, you have more room, and you have shorter length. This client decided, well, I get that with the 5 feet versus 6, but I want to have a little bit longer length, not so much because I have a bigger boat. His boat's like 24-foot center console. So it's just like he felt better about how he could tie it. He's not trying to bring a bigger boat in here. I mean, this is very limited in the upper reaches of Green Pond. So it's just more about, because you allow 100 square feet, everyone's going to take up to the max. That's why you see them 96 square feet. I mean, 6 foot 3 inches by 16 is 100 square feet. I've done some that way too. You know, it's just because they want the space.
If you're gonna spend the money, you might as well get the most you can get. I mean,
Yeah.
Second question? Courtney?
We see, this is sort of a big question, big picture thing. We see a lot over the course of a year or two. We have a number of applications, similar to this. People seeking to get licensed, unlicensed dogs. So I'm wondering out loud, has ever been an inventory taken of unlicensed dogs in the town of Falmouth? And wouldn't that, if not, would be a nice project for somebody from America?
Well, you could do that, Courtney.
Okay, I'll take it on.
Sounds like volunteering to me.
Yeah.
in the 90s, Carolyn Baker did that.
Yeah, there was a time, because in the early 90s, they had an amnesty program,
Yeah.
Chapter 91.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
And there wasn't a lot of work, so there was this concept, and we did it, we were thinking about doing it when I was at Holmes and McGrath, of doing like aerial photos and actually sent out a flyer to sort of say, hey, you have an unlicensed dog, but it never got to the point of having an inventory. But I bet a lot of them since 91, which is 01, 11, I mean, we're pushing 25 years. They've converted. There's a few out there.
I'm following on with Lori's point about, the more boats, the more docks you have, the more boats you have. Is that a good environmental issue? So, when you take that follow-up, and then you ask a question, here's the thing. Obviously, there's been some work on this before, and you kind of jog my memory a little bit. If you have that actual inventory anywhere, it would be interesting. That's all.
I have a final
Consider
comment
the
on this.
last doc we
And it was
just,
one that Maury said, and I repeated and actually got into trouble for this.
Let's not repeat it, okay?
Not repeat it?
No, let's not
Oh, we
repeat it.
got in
I know
trouble.
exactly where you're going,
I
and I
know.
would really appreciate if
Well,
you
what I am
chose
gonna
not
say
to go
is,
there.
this dock presumably is gonna be there 20, 30, 40, 50
Yes.
years, and the size of the boat, doesn't matter what size boat this person has now, we don't know what size boat is
Right.
gonna be on it.
And that area is not restricted because on the other side, that's going up where that splits, Mike.
Yeah.
Don't even tell me. I know the size of those boats going into Squibnocket, so don't say it's limited up there. When you just made the statement that it's limited, you can get a really good-sized boat in that.
Well, there's only like 2 more docks upstream.
No, I know exactly where you are, yeah.
All right, anything else?
I move that we close the hearing and take it under advisement.
second.
A motion by Gutsy and a second by Maury. Close the hearing, take it under advisement. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Mike, is here. Comments, questions from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by, nope. Motion by Gutsy to adjourn. Who was the second?
Me.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Who was it?
Record recording of that.
Yeah, that's